I keep an open mind for any music you can throw at me, but sometimes even the most popular bands out there fall flat.
Here we go again.
These are 10 more bands that most people love, but I just can't seem to get into, and we're starting with Suicidal Tendencies. Coming in hot here with not only an absolutely beloved band from the 80s, but one of the founders of crossover thrash. People from the punk and metal scenes alike can largely come together to enjoy what these guys bring to the table, and while I of course respect their legacy, I just could not really care less about the music. Even their most popular records, like How Will I Laugh Tomorrow When I Can't Even Smile Today and Lights Camera Revolution, do very little for me outside of a handful of songs. And really the main issue, the best as I can define it anyway, is one of inconsistency. The tone and vibe of albums is just all over the place, so even when I latch on to a track like Trip at the Brain, Hearing Voices, and Can't Bring Me Down, they end up surrounded by others that either sound nothing like them or just aren't nearly as well written.
Yeah, well, you know, that's just like, your opinion, man.
And then of course Mike's vocals are definitely an acquired taste, ranging from weird to outright comical at times. Honestly, in moments it reminds me of Dr. Roxo. Next up we have Erra. Whenever this band has an upcoming release or I mention modern metalcore, this name inevitably comes up in the comments, though with their latest album Cure, I feel like the fans may be somewhat turning on them. This is another one of those bands that I never really hate listening to, but instantly forget the minute I move on to something else. The phrase that comes to mind is perfectly passable djent. Music that can be enjoyable, but is ultimately just another retread of things I've heard 1,000 times before, and often better as a longtime metalcore fan, especially from the likes of Architects. It's like the musical equivalent of fast food, and one of the instances where I do agree with the Punk Rock MBA's view of modern metalcore, because frankly, this is the type of stuff that I think gives the genre a bad name to outsiders. You could do a lot worse, but you could also do a lot better. Polaris comes to mind. Next up we have Kataklysm. This Canadian death metal band has some albums that I have enjoyed, but as I've been working my way through their discography as part of my death metal tier list, more and more I'm finding myself in the minority with my opinions. Their early stuff in particular just strikes me as very amateur sounding, from the production to especially the Devil May Care sounding vocal performances, and that latter opinion in particular has led to quite a few comments stating that they love Sylvain's unhinged vocal style, but to me it just comes off as somebody who came into the studio with no prep and just belted out whatever came to mind in the moment. So far, I have mostly enjoyed The Prophecy and Goliath, and I have a feeling that I will come across more that I might dig, but in this moment I feel comfortable saying that I've disliked more than I have enjoyed. You always still have plenty more bands to go, but as always, if you're enjoying the video, hit the like button, it helps me out, and share some more of your own bands that you just don't really care for that everybody else around you seems to love. Also share where you disagree, respectfully. But next up we have Dark Funeral. I know plenty of people who love this band, but they've largely become the punching bag of black metal for me. They've never truly been terrible, but walking through their full discography for the tier list, it became clear that even their best albums are only about on par with most of their peers' mid-tier albums.
He's out of line, but he's right.
I personally find them to be pretty bland and forgettable, with the latest release, We Are the Apocalypse, being yet another prime example. I probably listened to that album at least 10 times in preparation to make the review, but since then I have had no drive to return to it and can't remember a single note. I do at least enjoy their 2016 album, Where Shadows Forever Reign, but really, if I never heard any of their music again, I wouldn't lose any sleep over it. Then we have Exhorder. Speaking of punching bags, this is the one you've probably heard me talk about the most in terms of thrash and groove metal here on the channel. In my last overrated albums list, I had a lot to say about Slaughter and the Vatican, and you can be mad if you want, but frankly, it's mainly because of all the hype in the comments for me to check the album out that led me to be all the more let down by it. Credit where it's due, the guitars and drumming are great, but that's also the case for so many classic albums in this genre that don't have these absolutely atrocious vocals.
It's just not good. It's not good.
It's not good.
I was ready to have my mind changed after hearing the Year of the Goat single for the latest album, which was an unquestionable banger. But unfortunately, the rest of the record was yet another downer. The lyrics are obvious, the music largely forgettable, and once more, the Jarl's just super annoying. Then we have Brodequin. Now, if all you want is sheer brutality and constant blast beats, I can understand why you love this band, because that's the promise you can always expect them to deliver on. Personally, though, the shtick gets old real fast for me. Whether it's the old stuff or new, I definitely find myself banging my head for a single track, but listening to a full album becomes a chore. I can only listen to those indecipherably gurgly vocals and dodgeball snares for so many minutes before it just becomes berating and droning. There's actually a phenomenon where any sort of constant noise starts to get filtered out as background naturally by your ears and brain over time, and music like this always makes me think about that. Even with records as tight as 30 minutes, I maybe get 2 to 3 songs in before it just all becomes... Then we have Ice 9 Kills. Now, on paper, this seems like a band I should love. Metalcore with alternations of super heavy sections with often catchy melodic choruses combined with a worship of classic horror movies. And I'll admit that there are songs here and there where it does work for me, like Funeral Derangements and The Box, but more often than not, I feel that these guys get lost in the sauce, where the melodramatic theatrics move past self-aware parody to just plain cringe.
You're doing too much. Do less. Pop down.
Like in many cases, I think the concept begins to supersede the music, and I'm of the opinion that writing a good song should always come first instead of seemingly focusing on hitting every film reference for the member berries. Every time I give these guys another chance, which I want to be clear is something I do all the time, because my opinions do change in some instances. But with these guys, every time I end up feeling like there is a version of this band that I could enjoy, but it's just overshadowed by the problems. I think there are a lot of talented people in this group, and I give them props for what they've accomplished, but I still think that they could do better. Then we have My Dying Bride. Of course, we needed a little bit more Doom on this list since I tend to have problems with most of the genre as a whole, but this is another one that definitely stands out to me. It was probably one of the first Death Doom bands I ever heard, actually, when my friends in high school recommended them to me around 2001 or so, and since then I've been hoping that they will click only to fall asleep for the 100th time. Even to this day, when they dropped a single for their latest release, A Mortal Binding, I listened to it with some anticipation, but I don't think I even got through the whole song. Everything on this list is preference-driven, but I think especially in this case, it just comes down to me finding most slower metal to be extremely dull.
Well, we're waiting.
Again, clear talent, and Aaron has a fantastic voice, but it's just not for me. Then we have Mortician. Similar notes as I had for Brodequin, but maybe even more so with this New York brutal death metal band. Working through my 90s death metal lists, I saw some pretty high scores from people on both Hacked Up for Barbecue and Chainsaw Dismemberment, but when I pushed play, it ended up being a case of stifling laughter rather than stank face. As I said in those videos, Will's vocals come off as almost a parody of what outsiders probably think death metal sounds like. It just feels like a caricature for me, with just how gurgly and buried in the mix they are. Then add the particularly bad programmed drums, and it's just got nothing for me. I don't even have a problem with programmed drums in general, but they just sound so obvious on that debut.
No, sir, I don't like it.
I did find myself appreciating the increased dynamics of the third album to some degree, but even then, it couldn't come close to cracking into the higher tiers, even in comparison just to other albums from that year. And then we have Bring Me the Horizon.
This is a war. It's a parasite. Got a feeling in your stomach 'cause you know that it's coming for you.
I've been working on a tier list for this UK band's discography for some time now, but it just keeps getting pushed back with all the delays of their upcoming new release. That said, I have had plenty of time to soak in their current eclectic discography, and frankly, I don't really love any of it. The early stuff is super heavy, but strikes me as a poorer retread of ideas that other bands had already been doing much better for half a decade at that point. Mid-career gets a little bit better, kind of tightening things up, but even then, I can think of dozens of similar albums from the 2010s I would throw on over those ones. ones. And then for their later career, while I deeply respect their seeming commitment to always doing something different and experimenting, the execution just rarely hits for me. From incorporation of SoundCloud rap to a Cradle of Filth feature, these just feel more like gimmicks than something that naturally works into overall good songwriting. Compare that to a band like the Callous Dowboys, who are also extremely eclectic, and yet their albums have a flow, and I end up loving both the record and every individual song. Even tracks people rave about, like Parasite Eve, still feel pretty half-baked. I would love for them to prove me wrong, and they have had new tracks that I've enjoyed, but similar to Ice Nine Kills, I almost feel like they need to try less hard, get some feedback from a good producer, and just get out of their own way.
Wait a minute! Who are you?
Y'all check out this video if you've missed part 1 or this one for something a little bit different. And again, let me know down in the comments what are some other bands that everybody around you seems to love, but you just can't get into for whatever reason. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.